Oscar Peterson was a giant both physically and musically. When he died in 2007, he left a huge footprint on the jazz landscape. His command of the piano was complete, both in classics and jazz, and although he was famed for his technique and speed, he downplays that aspect of his talent in this interview. He says that speed can be attained by practice and is not as important as invention. For non-Canadians, I should explain there is the same sort of competition between Montreal and Toronto as there is between New York and Chicago or London and Manchester, which is why I asked him about his move from Montreal to Toronto, sort of teasing about his decamping. This interview took place in Montreal in 1965, just 2 weeks before his 40th birthday. It was in the intermission of his concert. He was relaxed, warm and affable. Yes, I'm a huge fan.
Mr. Peterson, welcome back to Montreal.
Thank you, Martin. It's always a pleasure to return to what originally was the city of my birth.
How do you feel about playing in Montreal?
I enjoy it tremendously. I've always enjoyed playing in Montreal, even when I guess there's a certain amount of nostalgia attached to this, because Montreal is the city in which the first Oscar Peterson trio took form with two local musicians.
When you first started playing jazz, did you get much encouragement from your music teachers, your school teachers?
Yes, I did. I certainly did from my music teacher, Paul DeMarchi, who I'm sure Montrealers with any kind of memory are well aware of the name. He encouraged me to continue exploring the medium of jazz. Certainly the teachers in school, whether music teachers or not, encouraged me because they were aware of my, let's say, extracurricular activities outside of the school curriculum.
When you first started playing jazz professionally, where were the spots in Montreal where you could get exposure for your trio and for your own piano playing?
Well, Martin, obviously the most exposure for the trio came at what used to be the Alberta Lounge. It is now a part of the main square on Peel Street. We played there for almost 3 years.
How old were you then?
Oh my goodness, I guess I was about 22, 23, 21, 22, something like that.
What was the jazz scene like then in Montreal? Now it's practically dead.
Well, I would have to say that for one thing, different clubs were bringing in a lot of jazz groups. There were places even I could go after getting off work and go up and listen to American groups, not necessarily heavy names, if you know what I mean, but groups that certainly played jazz and were there for that purpose. And also there was a lot more visitations by the big bands like Basie Ellington, even Charlie Spivak, Gene Krupa, Benny Goodman. People like this were perennially coming through, and of course Norman Granz was bringing Jazz Philharmonic through on a yearly concert basis. As a matter of fact, this is how we originally got together.
So do you feel then that in Montreal had a far more swinging scene, far more receptive scene for jazz?
Well, Martin, I would have to say that geographically, if you look at if you take into consideration all of the various nightclubs that we have in Montreal now, and you take the ratio that are featuring jazz, I would have to certainly say yes to that question. I think the ironic thing to me has always been that this is almost unbelievable in that Montreal was the forerunner, the leader in jazz, and having jazz rooms in which musicians just came and played, even more so than the city I now reside in, Toronto, and certainly out west and so forth. And it's more or less hard to believe that the jazz rooms are so few and far between in this metropolis of this size and of this cultural knowledge.
Any clue why jazz has declined in Montreal, Oscar?
Well, to pin it down, I like to think individualistically. However, I would have to generalize and say that basically, I feel that as a medium, jazz was exploited sometimes in a bad way, not presented properly. And of course, there are a lot of, as we know, openings and shutdowns of various clubs that feature jazz, so they've never really got a chance to operate on a consistent basis. I know when we were in the club we were in, it was open the whole time we were there. It wasn't a matter of open 1 week and close 4 and then open again for 8 glorious weeks. I played there for 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. Is your music school still in existence in Toronto?
No, it isn't, Martin. We closed that about 3 years ago due to the weight of this type of work. It just seemed, ironically, that the moment we started the school, almost our work became heavier and heavier and heavier, and I had to turn down engagements. But at the same time, in order to fulfill the commitment of the school, but by the same token, I felt I had a responsibility to the youngsters and musicians that traveled the many miles some of them did to attend the school, and I didn't intend to cut it short during a term just to fulfill an engagement. But after the finale of the last term, I decided to let it go until such time as I can give up some of the traveling and devote more time to it.
Why did you start the school in the first place? Was it an economic necessity then? Or?
Well, certainly not an economic necessity, because we never really made any money off of the school. It was done as a labor of love. I would say more of a musical necessity, because invariably you come to different cities, or I come to different cities with the trio, and I'm sure that many group leaders can say this. You're questioned continually about, how do you do this? What should I do about my playing? And can you help me? And so forth. So we decided to try and do something about it by centralizing an institution in which youngsters could come and get advice and musical discipline.
What was the major query you got from would-be jazz pianists?
How to sustain prolonged creativity during a tune. I know that, ironically, possibly many people would think that the first question would be, how do you play this fast? To play fast, as I've always said, is no criterion to me. I think that if I train hard enough and long enough and prodigiously enough, not only myself, but anyone can do almost anything as far as speed if you start early enough. That isn't I think the thing is to be able to scoop up your creative abilities, whatever they may be, and elongate them and investigate them and project them to the audience over a period of numerous choruses. And I think this is what many of the youngsters found interesting in my playing.
You can tell them how to do it, but does everybody have the creativity to do it?
Oh, no, of course not. But regardless of whether or not they have the creativity, this wasn't the only thing, for instance, Martin, that we were teaching at the school. We were teaching a variety of subjects dealing with modern music. And it's like anything else. Although you may not become the greatest painter in the world if you go to art school, I'm sure it increases your ability to be to have a good appreciation for the medium. And this is, in many cases, what happened. So much so that we had to institute a course at night for doctors, lawyers, business people of all kinds that were interested as listeners and just wanted to increase their knowledge of what was going on and get a little more inside of the music that they were listening to.
Mm-hmm. This increasing their knowledge, how is the international scene for a jazz musician like yourself now? Has it steadied down, or is it still as uncertain as it used to be?
Well, at the risk of sounding like an egoist, Martin, I would have to say that we have never had it, thank God, sustained any trouble of that nature. I think a lot of this is due to the fact that we approach the thing certainly from a musical standpoint. We have musical obligations, but we have we feel as a group we have obligations to the public, and we've always treated it this way. We have always tried to conduct ourselves in a way, on and off stage, that most anyone of normal existence would expect of us. And we've always tried to give the public the very best of our efforts, no matter what the extenuating circumstances were. And if they were too extenuating, we would cancel.
What is the major part of your work? Club work? Concert work?
It's pretty hard to say. We go seasonally, Martin. For instance, in the spring of the year, we're all over the world on concerts. As a matter of fact, supposedly the beginning of next year, the 2nd of January, we'll be in Tokyo for a prolonged season of concerts. Yet in the summer and late fall, we do primarily nightclubs and television with the occasional concerts. In the summer, we relax a little more. In the early summer, we do clubs. As I said, in the spring, we're in Europe. And we don't work during the Christmas season.
Talking of traveling, Mr. Peterson, how do you, as a Montrealer, how do you defend your move to Toronto?
I don't defend it. As an individualist, I think I have the right to move or live wherever I want. Primarily, I will say this, though, when I moved to Toronto at that time, I thought it would be a little more convenient. For instance, we played Detroit quite a lot, Cleveland, Chicago, Buffalo, and with those cities much nearer to Toronto, it made it a lot easier for me. It certainly wasn't that I liked Toronto that much better than I liked Montreal. I enjoy Toronto very much. I also enjoy Montreal. So it's not a matter really of a defense.
How long have you been a professional musician now, Mr. Peterson?
Well, I just celebrated my 40th birthday last week, so I would have to say I've been a professional for 25 years.
After 25 years, what is your idea of your musical utopia?
My musical utopia right now that I'm looking forward to is to finish the amount of time that I have in mind for the trio, to devote a lot more time to writing. I have various ideas I would like to expound on. I would like to, for instance, write a modern day Christmas mass and things of that nature. And I'd like to have the time to do it. I hope to have the time in the near future.
Just one final question which I've been asking of late. If you hadn't been a jazz musician, what do you think you would like to have been?
Well, I guess I probably would have dickered with law, someone, or perhaps medicine.
Law or medicine?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, and I wish you a good second half of the concert.
Thank you, Martin.